The bread burned. Eleanora Hale stood at the back counter of Wheeler's Bakery, staring at the blackened loaves she'd just pulled from the oven, and felt absolutely nothing. Not panic, not shame, just the hollow recognition that she'd failed at the one thing she was supposed to do without thinking. "You trying to kill my customers or just run me into the ground?" Samuel Wheeler's voice cut through the flour-thick air. He was a thick man with thin patience, and Eleanora had tested the last of it 3 months ago when she'd asked for her wages on time. "I'll stay late," she said quietly. "Make up the loss." "You'll do more than that." He stepped closer, and she smelled the whiskey he pretended not to drink before noon. "You'll work Sunday. No extra pay." She nodded. What else could she do? He grunted and walked away, and Eleanora scraped the ruined bread into the waste bucket. Her hands were red and cracked from the work. The skin around her nails split from the cold and the constant submersion in water. She was 26 years old and looked 40 in the wrong light. This was her life. This had always been her life. The bakery door chimed and voices spilled in from the street, the kind of animated chatter that meant gossip was fresh and bloody. "Did you see it?" That was Martha Grimsby, the schoolteacher's wife, her voice pitched high with scandalized delight. "Posted right on the board at Hanson's store," another woman answered. Clara Denton, Eleanora thought, though she couldn't see them from where she stood. Big as life. Seeking a wife for a quiet life. Can you imagine? The women laughed, sharp and cruel. "Ronan Vex," Martha said, dropping her voice to a stage whisper that carried perfectly through the shop. "Seeking a wife. The man's killed 3 people. That anyone knows about," Clara added. "He's a monster. Who would answer something like that? What kind of desperate, pathetic creature would ride out to that ranch?" More laughter. Eleanora kept scraping bread, her movements mechanical. "Maybe he'll get one of the saloon girls," Martha continued. "They're used to brutes." Samuel emerged from the back office with a tray of day-old pastries for the display case. "Ladies," he said warmly, "what can I get you?" Eleanora tuned out the transaction. She'd heard enough gossip about Ronan Vex to last a lifetime. The giant rancher who lived in the mountains. The man who'd killed a claim jumper with his bare hands. Who'd beaten 2 men unconscious outside the saloon last winter. Who ran the largest cattle operation in the territory and never came to town except to sell stock or buy supplies. His face hard as granite, his reputation harder. No one crossed Ronan Vex. No one spoke to him unless they had to. And now, apparently, he wanted a wife. The absurdity of it almost made her smile. Almost. The day ended the way it always did, with aching feet, empty pockets, and the long walk back to the boarding house where Eleanora rented a room barely large enough for a bed and a washstand. Mrs. Calloway, the proprietor, didn't allow cooking or visitors or noise after 8, and she expected rent every Friday without fail. Eleanora climbed the narrow stairs to the 3rd floor, unlocked her door, and stepped into the space that contained everything she owned. A trunk with 3 dresses, a coat with a torn lining, a pair of boots she'd resoled herself, a hairbrush with half its bristles missing, no photographs, no letters, no family. She sat on the edge of the bed and untied her boots, wincing as her feet protested. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mr. Patterson coughing in the next room, the wet, rattling cough that meant he wouldn't see spring. This was the future. This room, this work, this slow erosion until there was nothing left but bones and silence. Eleanora laid back on the bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. She thought about the notice. Seeking a wife for a quiet life. What kind of man posted something like that? What kind of life was he offering? Probably nothing good. Probably a different kind of trap. But then again, how much worse could it be than this? She didn't plan it. That's what she told herself later when people asked why she'd done something so reckless. She didn't wake up that Saturday morning with a decision already made. She went through her usual routine: wash, dress, walk to the bakery, tie on her apron, start the ovens. But at noon, when Samuel told her to sweep the front step, she walked outside and saw the notice board across the street. And she saw the paper. It was simple, blunt even, written in dark, firm handwriting on a torn piece of ledger paper. Seeking a wife for a quiet life. Woman of work preferred. No drinkers, no gossips. Bring yourself and nothing else. Ronan Vex, Iron Creek Ranch. Below it, someone had scrawled in pencil, "Monster looking for a victim." Someone else had drawn a crude skull. Eleonora stood there with the broom in her hands, reading and rereading the notice while the street moved around her. A wagon rolled past. Two men argued outside the land office. A dog barked. She thought about the bread she'd burned, about Samuel's whiskey breath, about Mrs. Calloway's judgment and Mr. Patterson's cough, and the endless grinding sameness of every day that stretched behind and ahead of her like a road with no destination. She thought about being 26 and invisible, and she thought, what if I wasn't? You're leaving? Samuel stared at her like she'd announced she was sprouting wings. Yes, Eleanor said. She kept her voice level. Today. Today? Just like that? What about the evening bake? You'll manage. His face reddened. You think you can just walk out? You owe me for that burned bread. You owe me for... I owe you nothing. The words came out harder than she'd intended, but she didn't soften them. You've had 6 years of my work for half wages and no thanks. We're even. You'll never work in this town again, he sputtered. Good. She untied her apron, folded it, and set it on the counter. Then she walked out. The air outside tasted like freedom. At the boarding house, Eleonora packed quickly. Everything she owned fit in the trunk, and the trunk fit in the back of the supply wagon heading north, the one driven by old Tom Farley, who asked no questions if you paid him $1. You sure about this? Tom asked as they rattled out of town. Iron Creek Ranch ain't exactly welcoming territory. I'm sure, Eleonora lied. She wasn't sure of anything, but she was moving, and movement felt like progress. The road climbed into the mountains, following a creek that ran fast and cold with snowmelt. Pine trees crowded close on both sides, their branches heavy with the last of winter. The air thinned and sharpened, and Eleonora pulled her coat tighter. Tom talked to fill the silence. Known Vex for maybe 10 years now. Keeps to himself mostly. Built that ranch from nothing. Works harder than 3 men combined, they say. They also say he's killed people, Eleonora said. Tom was quiet for a moment. Yeah, they say that too. But people say a lot of things, don't they? Doesn't mean it's all true. What do you think is true? The old man considered this. I think Ronan Vex is a hard man in a hard place. I think he doesn't suffer fools, and I think he's got no patience for liars or cheats. Whether that makes him a monster, he shrugged. That's for you to decide. They rode in silence after that. The ranch appeared suddenly, as if the forest had simply opened its hands and revealed it. A wide valley stretched out below them, bordered by steep ridges and bisected by the same creek they'd been following. In the center stood a collection of buildings. A main house, 2 barns, a bunkhouse, corrals, and storage sheds. Everything was built from dark timber and looked solid, built to last, built to withstand. Smoke rose from the main house chimney. Tom pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of the property. This is as far as I go, he said. Ranch rules. No uninvited guests past the fence line. Eleonora climbed down, and Tom handed her the trunk. You want me to wait? He asked. In case, no. She lifted the trunk, testing its weight. Thank you, Tom. He tipped his hat, turned the wagon, and left. Eleonora stood alone at the fence line, holding everything she owned, staring at the ranch in the valley below. Then she started walking. She made it halfway to the main house before he appeared. One moment the yard was empty. The next, a man stood near the barn, watching her. Ronan Vex. The stories hadn't lied about his size. He was massive, not fat, but built like something carved from the mountains themselves. Broad shoulders, thick arms, a frame that suggested he could lift a horse if he needed to. He wore working clothes, dark trousers, a heavy shirt, suspenders. No coat, despite the cold. His face was hard to read from a distance. Dark hair, dark beard, strong features. He didn't move. Just watched her approach with the stillness of something used to waiting. Eleonora's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept walking. She crossed the yard, climbed the 3 steps to the porch, and set down her trunk. Then she looked up at him. Up close, he was even larger, and his eyes, dark, steady, unreadable, fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to step back. She didn't. I'm here about the notice, she said. His expression didn't change. What notice? The one you posted, about a wife. Silence. He studied her like she was a puzzle he hadn't decided whether to solve. Finally, he spoke. His voice was deep, rougher than she'd expected, but clear. "You read it wrong, then. That notice was for someone who knows what she's getting into." "I know exactly what I'm getting into," Eleonora said. "A hard life, hard work, a man with a bad reputation, and a chance to build something instead of rot in town." Something flickered in his eyes. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. "What's your name?" "Eleonora Hale." "You got family, Eleonora Hale?" "No." "Debts?" "No." "Anyone who'll come looking for you?" The question sent a chill down her spine, but she answered honestly. "No." He considered this. Then, abruptly, he turned and walked toward the barn. "Come on." She followed, leaving her trunk on the porch. Inside the barn, the air was warmer, thick with the smell of hay and animals. Ronan moved through the space with practiced efficiency, checking feed buckets, examining a horse's hoof, adjusting a harness. Eleonora watched, saying nothing. Finally, he stopped and faced her. "You ever worked a ranch?" "No, but I learned fast." "You afraid of hard work?" "No." "You afraid of me?" The question hung between them. Eleonora met his gaze and told the truth. "Yes." For the first time, something that might have been surprise crossed his face. "But you came anyway." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I have nothing. Because I'm tired of being invisible. Because I'd rather risk dying than keep barely living." "Because you offered a quiet life," she said instead. "And I'm tired of loud ones." Ronan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, as if she'd passed some test she hadn't known she was taking. "You'll sleep in the spare room. Meals are at 6, noon, and 6. Work starts at dawn. You'll help with the house, the cooking, the preserving, and the animals when needed. Sundays you rest. Understood?" "Understood." "I don't drink. I don't gamble. I don't go to town unless I have to. I expect the same from you." "Agreed. And one more thing." He stepped closer, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "If you're running from something, I need to know now. I won't have trouble brought to my door." Eleonora's pulse quickened. She thought about lying, about inventing a safe, simple past. But something in his eyes told her he'd know. "There's a man," she said quietly. "From years ago. He claimed he had a right to me. Papers, he said. A contract. But it wasn't real. None of it was real. I left. And I thought that was the end of it." "You think he's still looking?" "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he's forgotten I exist." Ronan was quiet. Then, "If he shows up here, he'll regret it." It wasn't a boast. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered in that same level tone. Eleonora believed him. "Come on," he said. "I'll show you the house." The main house was sparse but well built. A central room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, 2 bedrooms, and a loft. Everything was clean and functional, with none of the decorative touches a woman might add. It felt like a place built for survival, not comfort. Ronan showed her the spare room, small, with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the valley. "This is yours," he said. "Door locks from the inside." She nodded, grateful for that detail. He hesitated at the threshold, as if there was something else he wanted to say. Finally, "People in town talk. They'll have told you I'm dangerous." They did. "Some of it's true. I've hurt men who needed hurting. I've got a temper I keep on a short leash, and I don't tolerate thieves or liars or men who think they can take what isn't theirs." He paused. "But I've never hurt a woman. Never will. You have my word on that." Eleonora searched his face. "Why should I believe you?" "Because if I wanted to hurt you, I'd have done it already. And because you're here by choice. You can leave the same way, any time you want." He left her then, closing the door behind him. Eleonora sat on the bed and tried to process what she'd just done. She'd walked away from everything familiar into the home of a man the entire town feared, based on nothing more than a torn piece of paper and her own desperate hope for something different. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of orange and gold. She unpacked her trunk, hung her dresses in the small closet, and placed her hairbrush on the dresser. Then she went to find Ronan and ask what she could do to help with supper. The days developed a rhythm. Dawn came early at Iron Creek Ranch, announced by roosters and the sound of Ronan moving through the house. Eleonora learned to wake with the light, dress quickly, and start the fire in the kitchen stove before he came in from the barn. Breakfast was simple: cornmeal mush, eggs, bacon when they had it. Ronan ate efficiently and without much conversation, then disappeared into the work of the ranch. Eleonora threw herself into the domestic tasks with the same determination she'd once applied to the bakery. She cleaned, cooked, mended, organized. She learned to churn butter and render lard and preserve vegetables. She fed the chickens and collected eggs and hauled water from the creek. The work was hard, but it was hers. No one criticized her for burned bread or docked her wages or made her feel worthless. And slowly, carefully, she began to understand Ronan Vex. He wasn't cruel. He was controlled. He wasn't violent. He was watchful. And he wasn't a monster. He was a man who'd built a fortress against a world that had probably hurt him too many times to count. They barely spoke for the first week. But she noticed things. The way he always poured her coffee before his own. The way he fixed the broken hinge on her bedroom door without being asked. The way he worked from before dawn until after dark, pushing himself relentlessly, as if rest was something he didn't deserve. On the 8th day, during the midday meal, he broke the silence. "You're a good cook." Eleonora looked up, surprised. "Thank you. Better than me, anyway." "That's not a high bar." The corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. Fair point. After that, the conversations came easier. Small things at first. Comments about the weather, questions about supplies, observations about the animals. Then, slowly, deeper things. "Why'd you build here?" Eleonora asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the last light fade from the valley. Ronan was quiet for a moment. "Wanted something no one could take from me. Land this far out, this hard to work. Nobody else wanted it. That made it perfect. Lonely, though. Lonely's better than betrayed." She understood that more than she wanted to admit. "What about you?" he asked. "How'd you end up in Wheeler's bakery?" "Necessity. My parents died when I was 16. Fever. I had no skills and no money, so I took the first job I could find. Turned out to be the only job I could find." "And you stayed for 10 years? "Didn't have anywhere else to go." Ronan nodded slowly. "Until now." "Until now." They sat in comfortable silence after that, and Eleonora realized something startling. She felt safe. Not just physically safe, though there was that too, but safe in a deeper way. Free from judgment, free from performance. Just free. Bob. 3 weeks after her arrival, a rider came to the ranch. Eleonora was hanging laundry when she saw him approaching. A tall man on a gray horse moving at an easy pace. Ronan emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, and waited. The rider stopped at the fence line. "Vex." "Marshal." Ronan's tone was neutral. So this was the law. Eleonora watched from behind the clothesline, trying to appear busy while listening intently. Trying to go. "Heard you got yourself some company," the marshal said. "Woman from town." "That's right." "She here willingly?" "Ask her yourself." Ronan gestured toward Eleonora. The marshal's eyes found her. "Ma'am, you all right?" Eleonora stepped forward, squaring her shoulders. "I'm fine, Marshal. I'm here by choice." "You sure about that? Vex here's got a reputation." "So do I," she said coolly, "for being able to make my own decisions." The marshal studied her, then Ronan, then nodded. "All right then, just checking. Town's been talking." "Town always talks," Ronan said. "That it does." The marshal tipped his hat. "You two stay out of trouble." He rode away, and Eleonora walked over to where Ronan stood. "That happen often?" she asked. "First time," he admitted. "Usually they leave me alone." "They're worried I'm a prisoner." "Are you?" She looked at him, this massive, feared man who poured her coffee first and fixed her door and gave her freedom she'd never had. "No," she said. "I'm not." Something in his expression softened. "Good." That night over supper, Ronan asked a question that surprised her. "You ever think about getting married for real?" Eleonora paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean legally, properly, not just This arrangement. Her heart started beating faster. Why? He looked uncomfortable, as if the words didn't come naturally. Because you're good at this, the work, the life, and because I don't want you to leave. I'm not planning to leave, but you could, any time. And maybe that's how it should be. I don't know. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not good at this. Talking. Eleonora set down her fork. You're doing fine. What I'm trying to say is, I think this could work. You and me, building something here, but only if you want it to. She thought about the question carefully. Did she want to marry Ronan Vex? To bind herself legally to a man she'd known for less than a month? But then, what was the alternative? Go back to town? Find another bakery? Another room? Another 10 years of invisibility? Or stay here, where she was seen, where her work mattered, where she felt for the first time in her life like she had a future worth living? I want it, she said. Relief flooded his face. Yeah? Yeah. Then we'll do it right. Go to town, get the license, have the ceremony, make it legal. The town will have a lot to say about it. Let them talk, Eleonora smiled. You say that like it's easy. It is easy. Their opinions don't feed us or shelter us or matter worth a damn. So let them talk. And for the first time in years, Eleonora laughed. Really laughed. Ronan smiled back, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. All right then, she said. Let's get married. They rode to town the following Saturday. Ronan drove the wagon, and Eleonora sat beside him, wearing her best dress, and trying not to feel self-conscious about the stares they'd inevitably attract. The town noticed immediately. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People turned to watch. Curtains twitched in windows. Ronan ignored all of it. He tied up the wagon outside the land office, helped Eleonora down, and walked inside with her like they owned the place. The clerk's eyes went wide. Mr. Vex? Miss Hale? We need a marriage license, Ronan said. The clerk fumbled with the papers, his hand shaking slightly. Of course. I'll just need, some information. They filled out the forms, answered the questions, paid the fee. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Ronan took Eleonora's hand, the first time he'd touched her beyond the occasional brush of fingers, and led her through the crowd toward the church. Reverend Paulson was working in his garden when they arrived. He stood slowly, wiping dirt from his hands, his face unreadable. Ronan, Miss Hale, what can I do for you? We want to get married, Ronan said. Today. The Reverend's eyebrows rose. Today? Don't you want to wait? Plan properly? No, Eleonora said firmly. We don't. The Reverend looked between them, seemed to reach some conclusion, and nodded. All right then, give me 10 minutes to change. The ceremony was brief and witnessed by the Reverend's wife and the church organist, who happened to be present. Eleonora spoke her vows in a clear voice, feeling the weight of each word. Ronan's voice was steady, his hand warm in hers. When the Reverend pronounced them married, Ronan kissed her, brief and chaste, but real. They were walking back to the wagon when the shout came. Eleonora! She froze. The voice was familiar in the worst possible way. A voice from nightmares. A voice she'd spent 6 years trying to forget. She turned slowly. A man stood at the end of the street, tall, well-dressed, with silver-shot hair and the kind of face that looked trustworthy until you learned better. He was flanked by 2 younger men, hired muscle by the look of them. Marcus Tremaine. Eleonora, he said again, smiling as he walked toward them. It's been a long time. Ronan's hand moved to her lower back, protective, steadying. Who is he? Trouble, she whispered. Marcus stopped 10 feet away, his smile never wavering. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? Leave, Eleonora said. You have no business with me. No business? Marcus's smile widened. My dear, we have all kinds of business. Or have you forgotten? We're married. The words hit like a physical blow. Ronan went very still beside her. What did you say? Marcus reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. It's all legal, I assure you. A contract signed by Eleonora herself when she was 18. Binding and recognized by law. She's my wife. Has been for 8 years. That's a lie, Eleonora said, but her voice shook. You tricked me. I didn't know what I was signing. Ignorance of a contract doesn't void it, I'm afraid. Marcus's tone was pleasant, reasonable. And I have witnesses, documents, everything properly filed. Ronan's voice was deadly quiet. Get off my land. Your land? Marcus laughed. I think you mean my wife's current residence. Don't worry, Vex. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just here to collect what's mine. She's not yours. The law says otherwise. The two hired men moved forward, hands resting on their gun belts. Eleonora's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when she'd finally found something worth keeping. Ronan, she said quietly. Don't. He has the law on his side. I don't care about the law. You should. She turned to face him, her heart breaking. If you fight this, he'll destroy you. He has money, connections, everything. He'll ruin you. I don't care. I do. She touched his face, her hand trembling. I can't let you lose everything because of me. Eleonora? No. She stepped back, pulling away from his reach. This is my fight, not yours. She turned to Marcus, hatred burning in her chest. If I go with you, you leave him alone. You leave this ranch alone. No legal trouble, no retaliation. Swear it. Marcus inclined his head. You have my word. Your word is worthless. Perhaps, but it's all you're getting. He gestured toward a waiting carriage. Shall we? Eleonora looked back at Ronan one last time. His face was a mask of controlled rage, every muscle tight, his hands clenched into fists. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then she walked toward the carriage. She'd taken 3 steps when Ronan's voice stopped her. Eleonora. She turned. He stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by gawking townspeople, his eyes locked on hers. I'll find you, he said. I don't care how long it takes or what I have to do. I'll find you. It wasn't a promise. It was a vow. Marcus laughed. We'll see about that. Eleonora climbed into the carriage and the door closed behind her. As they pulled away, she looked back through the window. Ronan stood in the street, watching her disappear. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The carriage wheels ground against the dirt road, each rotation taking Eleonora further from the only place she'd ever felt like she belonged. She sat rigid on the velvet bench seat, hands folded in her lap, refusing to look at Marcus Tremaine across from her. He looked older than she remembered, more refined, the kind of man who'd learned to hide his cruelty behind expensive clothes and practice smiles. You've lost weight, he said conversationally, as if they were old friends catching up. The frontier life doesn't suit you. Eleonora said nothing. Not speaking to me. That's childish, Eleonora. We have a long journey ahead. Might as well be civil. Where are we going? Denver. I have business interests there now. Quite successful ones, actually. You'll have a proper home. Servants. Everything a wife should have. I'm not your wife. Marcus sighed and pulled out the document again, unfolding it with deliberate care. This says otherwise. Your signature is right here. June 14th, 1881. Do you remember that day? She remembered. She'd been 18, orphaned for 2 years, working at a boarding house for pennies. Marcus had been a guest. Charming, wealthy, promising to help her find better employment. He'd asked her to sign some papers. Employment contracts, he'd said. Standard formalities. She'd been too young and too desperate to question it. I was a child, she said. I didn't know what I was signing. You were 18, a legal adult, and you signed of your own free will. You lied to me. I simplified. There's a difference. He refolded the document and tucked it away. Besides, it doesn't matter now. What's done is done. You ran away, which caused me considerable embarrassment and expense, but I'm willing to overlook that. We'll start fresh. I'd rather die. Marcus's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Dramatic. You always had a flair for the theatrical. But let's be realistic, shall we? You have no money, no family, no legal standing. That marriage you just participated in? Void. Illegal. Your Mr. Vex could face charges for it, actually. Bigamy is a serious crime. The threat landed like a punch. Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. Unless, of course, you cooperate. Marcus continued smoothly. Come to Denver willingly. Play the dutiful wife, and I'll forget all about your mountain man and his little ranch. He'll never hear from me again. Why? Eleanor asked. Why go through all this? You could have any woman you wanted. Why me? For the first time, Marcus's expression hardened into something honest. Because you're mine. You signed that contract. You belong to me, and I don't let go of what's mine. The carriage rolled on through the afternoon, leaving Montana behind. Eleanor stared out the window and thought about Ronan's face. The controlled fury, the absolute certainty in his voice when he'd said he'd find her. She believed him. She just didn't know if belief would be enough. Back at Iron Creek Ranch, Ronan stood in the empty house and tried to think past the rage. His first instinct had been to follow immediately, to ride after that carriage and tear it apart with his bare hands. But that was exactly what Tremaine would expect. Exactly what would get Eleonora hurt and himself thrown in prison, or worse. So instead, he forced himself to think. He went to the barn, saddled his horse, and rode to town. Not fast, not reckless. Controlled. The marshal's office was a small building near the center of town. Ronan tied up outside and walked in without knocking. Marshal Dawson looked up from his desk, his expression carefully neutral. Vex, heard about the excitement this afternoon. I need information. About Marcus Tremaine? Join the line. Dawson leaned back in his chair. Man's got more lawyers than I've got bullets. You planning to do something stupid? I'm planning to get my wife back. She's not your wife, that's the problem. Ronan's hands clenched. The marriage this morning doesn't count if she was already married to someone else. You know that. Dawson's tone wasn't unkind, just factual. Tremaine's got documentation going back 8 years. I've seen it. It's legal. It's fraud. Probably, but proving that in court, against a man with Tremaine's resources? You'd need evidence, witnesses, money for lawyers. You got any of that? Ronan was silent. Dawson sighed. Look, I don't like the man any more than you do. Something about him sets my teeth on edge, but my personal feelings don't change the law. He came here, showed his papers, and left with a woman who's legally his wife. I can't stop that. Can you tell me where he's taking her? Denver, from what I heard. He's got property there, a house on Capitol Hill. You know the address? No, but I can ask around. Dawson studied Ronan carefully. What are you planning to do? Whatever I have to? That's what I'm afraid of. Listen to me, Vex. You go to Denver and start trouble. You'll end up dead or in prison. Tremaine's got connections. Judges, politicians. You're a rancher from the middle of nowhere. Who do you think they'll believe? I don't care. Well, you should. Because if you're dead or locked up, you can't help her at all. The logic cut through Ronan's anger like cold water. He hated it, but Dawson was right. Then what do I do? The words came out rough, reluctant. Dawson was quiet for a moment. Then, you find leverage. Something Tremaine wants more than he wants her. Or something he's afraid of losing. Every man like that has secrets. Find them. How? Carefully. Legally, if possible. And if you need help, Dawson hesitated. I might know someone in Denver, a detective. Does private work. Not cheap, but he's good at finding dirt. Ronan pulled out his wallet. How much? Put that away. I'll write you a letter of introduction. What you work out with him is your business. Dawson found a piece of paper and started writing. His name's Henry Blackwood. He's not a saint, but he's honest in his own way. Tell him I sent you. He finished the letter, folded it, and handed it over. Ronan took it, his jaw tight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This could take weeks, months even. You prepared for that? No. He wasn't. The thought of Eleonora trapped with that man for weeks or months made Ronan want to burn the world down. But he nodded. I'll do what needs doing. Then start by going home and getting your affairs in order. You'll need money, lots of it. Sell cattle if you have to, and find someone to run the ranch while you're gone. Ronan left the office with the letter in his pocket and a plan forming in his mind. It wasn't a good plan. It wasn't even close to what he wanted to do. But it was better than riding blind into Denver and getting himself killed. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than it ever had. The house was exactly as they'd left it that morning. Breakfast dishes still on the table. Eleonora's shawl draped over a chair. Ronan stood in the doorway and let himself feel it. The anger, the helplessness, the fear that he'd never see her again. Then he got to work. The journey to Denver took 3 days by carriage. 3 days during which Eleanor spoke only when necessary and spent the rest of her time memorizing everything she could about their route, their stops, Marcus's habits. If Ronan was coming for her, and she had to believe he was, she'd need to help him however she could. They stayed at hotels along the way. Nice ones, where Marcus was clearly known and welcomed. Each night he took separate rooms and made a show of being respectful, as if that somehow negated the fact that she was his prisoner. On the third night, as they approached Denver, Marcus knocked on her door. "We'll arrive tomorrow," he said through the wood. "I expect you to present yourself appropriately. Hair done, your best dress. The staff will be watching, and I won't have them thinking I've married some frontier ragamuffin." Eleanor didn't answer. "I know you're angry," he continued, "but that will pass. You'll see. Denver is a proper city, culture, society, everything Montana lacks. You'll be happy there." "I was happy in Montana." "No, you weren't. You were surviving. There's a difference." He walked away, and Eleanor sat on the edge of the hotel bed, trying not to scream. Well, Denver was bigger than Eleanor had imagined. Tall buildings crowded together, streets packed with wagons and carriages, people everywhere. The noise was overwhelming after the quiet of the ranch. Marcus's house stood on a hill in the nicest part of town. 3 stories of brick and stone, surrounded by manicured gardens and an iron fence. A prison dressed up as luxury. A butler opened the door as their carriage pulled up. "Welcome home, Mr. Tremaine." "Thank you, Carson. This is Mrs. Tremaine. Please have Mrs. Hodges prepare the mistress's rooms." Mrs. Hodges turned out to be the housekeeper, a stern woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a sharper mouth. She led Eleanor upstairs to a suite of rooms that were bigger than the entire house at Iron Creek Ranch. "Dinner's at 7, Mrs. Hodges said. "Mr. Tremaine expects punctuality. Your things will be brought up shortly, and I've laid out an appropriate dress for this evening." Eleanor looked at the dress. Silk, expensive, nothing like anything she'd ever owned. "I have my own clothes." "Those frontier rags, absolutely not. Mr. Tremaine has standards." "I don't care what Mr. Tremaine—" "You will care," Mrs. Hodges interrupted, her voice cold, "or you'll find life here very difficult. Mr. Tremaine is a generous man to those who please him. To those who don't—" She let the sentence hang. "Dinner at 7. Don't be late." She left, and Eleanor heard the distinct click of a lock. She tried the door, locked from the outside. Of course it was. Eleanor moved to the window, 3 stories up, overlooking the street, too high to jump. She tested the window itself, locked as well, with no obvious way to open it. She was trapped. For the first time since leaving Montana, Eleanor let herself cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet tears of frustration and fear and exhaustion. She traded one kind of prison for another, and this one came with silk dresses and silver spoons. After a few minutes, she forced herself to stop. Crying solved nothing. She needed to think, to plan. She examined the room more carefully. The furniture was expensive but impersonal. No books, no papers, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. This was a guest room, or a room prepared for a specific purpose. For her. How long had Marcus been planning this? The thought made her skin crawl. At 7 o'clock, someone unlocked the door. A young maid stood in the hallway. "Mrs. Tremaine? Dinner's ready." Eleanor had changed into the silk dress, though it made her feel like she was wearing a costume. She followed the maid downstairs to a dining room that could have seated 20 people. Marcus sat at the head of the table, already served. "Ah, there you are. Please sit." Eleanor sat as far from him as the table allowed. "The dress suits you," he said. "I knew it would." "Where are my clothes?" "Being cleaned, or discarded if they're beyond saving. Don't worry, I've arranged for a complete wardrobe. You'll have everything you need." "I need to leave." Marcus cut into his steak with precise movements. "We've been over this. You're exactly where you belong. Now, I've made appointments for you. Tomorrow you'll meet with a dressmaker and a hairdresser. Friday there's a reception I want you to attend with me. It's important that we present the right image. I'm not going to any reception." "Yes, you are. Unless you'd prefer I make good on my earlier threat regarding Mr. Vex. 1 telegram to Montana, and he'll find himself facing very serious charges. Eleonora's appetite vanished. You said you'd leave him alone. I said I'd forget about him if you cooperated. Are you cooperating? She wanted to throw her plate at his head. Instead, she picked up her fork and took a bite of food she couldn't taste. Marcus smiled. That's better. You'll adjust. They all do. They all do? How many women have you done this to? You're the only one who ran. The others were smart enough to see the advantages of the arrangement. What happened to them? They're living comfortable lives, well provided for. Happy, as far as I know. You're lying. Marcus's smile widened. Prove it. They ate in silence after that. When the meal ended, Marcus stood. I have work to do. Feel free to explore the house. Though I should mention, all the exterior doors are locked, and the staff has been instructed not to assist you in any escape attempts. So please don't embarrass yourself by trying. He left her alone in the massive dining room. Eleonora sat there for a long time, thinking. Then she got up and started exploring. 2 weeks after Eleanor's departure, Ronan arrived in Denver with a saddlebag full of cash from selling half his cattle and a head full of carefully controlled rage. He found Henry Blackwood's office in a shabby building near the rail yard. The detective was a lean man in his 40s with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers. Marshal Dawson sent you? Blackwood read the letter of introduction, then looked up at Ronan. You're the rancher, the one who married Tremaine's wife. She's not his wife. Not really. The law says different, but I'm guessing you're not here for a legal opinion. Blackwood gestured to a chair. Sit. Tell me what you want. Ronan sat. I want information on Marcus Tremaine. Everything. His business, his properties, his secrets. Anything I can use against him. That'll cost you. How much? $200 to start. More if I have to bribe people or travel. Ronan counted out the money without hesitation. How long? Depends what I find. Could be days. Could be weeks. I don't have weeks. Then you should have thought of that before you got mixed up with a man like Tremaine. Blackwood pocketed the cash. Where are you staying? Haven't figured that out yet. There's a boarding house 2 blocks from here. Clean enough. Tell Mrs. Murphy I sent you. Blackwood pulled out a notebook. Now tell me everything you know about your wife, her background, how she met Tremaine, everything. Details matter. Ronan talked for an hour, recounting everything Eleanor had told him and everything he'd observed. Blackwood took notes in a cramped shorthand, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Ronan finished, Blackwood flipped his notebook closed. All right, give me 3 days. Come back Thursday afternoon. I should have something by then. What do I do until then? Stay out of sight. Don't go anywhere near Tremaine or his house. Don't ask questions. Don't make trouble. The last thing we need is him knowing you're in town. It was the hardest thing Ronan had ever done, walking away from that office knowing Eleonora was somewhere in this city, trapped and alone. But he did it. He found the boarding house, paid for a week, spent the next 3 days pacing his small room and trying not to lose his mind. Eleonora's days in Denver developed a numbing routine. Mornings she spent locked in her room. Afternoons she was allowed supervised time in the garden or the library, always with Mrs. Hodges hovering nearby. Evenings were for dinner with Marcus, where he talked about his business interests and social obligations as if she cared. She played along, wore the dresses, attended the reception, where she smiled and nodded and said as little as possible while Marcus introduced her as his wife to people who looked at her with polite curiosity and nothing else. No one questioned it. No one seemed to care that she was a prisoner. But Eleonora was learning. She learned that Marcus owned 3 businesses in Denver: a bank, a mining supply company, and a freight operation. She learned that he attended the same gentleman's club every Tuesday and Thursday evening. She learned that the servants were terrified of him, that Mrs. Hodges had worked for him for 7 years, and that the young maid, Sarah, sometimes left Eleanor's door unlocked for a few extra minutes in the morning. Small things, but small things could matter. On her 10th day in Denver, Eleonora tried something risky. During her supervised time in the library, she asked Mrs. Hodges a question. The other women Mr. Tremaine mentioned, the ones before me, where are they now? Mrs. Hodges' expression didn't change. That's not your concern. I'm just curious. He said they were happy. Then believe him. But you know where they are, don't you? You were here when they were. I was here when one of them was. Miss Catherine. She left 5 years ago. Left or was sent away? Mrs. Hodges stood abruptly. That's enough questions. Back to your room. But Eleonora had seen something in the housekeeper's eyes, something that looked almost like guilt. That night during dinner, Eleonora brought it up again. I want to write to Catherine, she said casually. The woman who was here before me. You said she was happy. I'd like to congratulate her. Marcus paused mid-bite. Why would you want to do that? Because you said we'd get along, that she understood the arrangement. Catherine is none of your concern. Where is she? I don't know. We lost touch. You don't know where a woman you claim to care for is now? That seems convenient. Marcus set down his fork with deliberate care. Eleonora, you're pushing boundaries you don't understand. I suggest you stop. Or what? You'll lock me in my room? You already do that. You'll take away my privileges? I have none. What exactly do you think you can threaten me with? His hand moved fast, slamming down on the table hard enough to make the dishes jump. I can make things worse. Trust me, you have no idea how much worse I can make things. Eleonora met his eyes, refusing to flinch. Then do it, because I'm not going to pretend this is normal. I'm not going to smile and nod and play your perfect wife. You can lock every door in this house, but you can't make me willing. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Marcus smiled, a cold, cruel expression that made Eleonora's blood run ice. You think you're strong, he said quietly. You think your frontier life made you tough, but you're not strong, you're stubborn, and stubbornness breaks easier than you'd think. He stood, walked around the table, and grabbed her arm, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to hurt. You want to know about Catherine? Fine, I'll tell you. She was stubborn too, asked too many questions, made too many demands, so I had her committed to an asylum. For her own good, of course. Mental instability, depression. The doctors agreed she needed treatment. Eleonora's stomach dropped. You're lying. Am I? The asylum's called Brightwood. It's about 20 miles north of here. Very expensive, very private. Catherine's been there for 4 years now. I visit twice a year to ensure she's being properly cared for. He released her arm and stepped back. So you have a choice, Eleonora. You can cooperate and live a comfortable life here, or you can keep fighting, and I'll make sure you end up in the same place. Locked in a room, yes, but without the silk dresses or the good meals. Just you and the other lunatics, screaming yourselves hoarse. He walked out, leaving Eleonora alone in the dining room. She sat very still, trying to process what she'd just heard. An asylum. He'd locked a woman in an asylum for defying him, and he'd do the same to her if she pushed too hard. Eleonora's hand shook as she stood and walked back to her room. The door locked behind her with its familiar click. She sat on the bed and thought about Catherine, about Ronan, about the impossible situation she was trapped in, and she thought about what Marcus had said. Stubbornness breaks easier than you'd think. Maybe it did. But Eleonora had been breaking and rebuilding herself for years. She knew how to endure. On Thursday afternoon, Ronan returned to Blackwood's office. The detective looked up from a pile of papers, his expression grim. Your timing's good. Sit down. Ronan sat. Blackwood pushed a folder across the desk. Marcus Tremaine, age 43, widower, no children. Came to Denver 15 years ago with money from back east. Family money, supposedly, though I can't confirm that. Started buying businesses, built a reputation as a shrewd investor, respected in certain circles. What circles? The ones that value money over morals. But here's where it gets interesting. Blackwood pulled out a specific paper. 7 years ago, a woman named Margaret Hayes disappeared. She'd been seen with Tremaine regularly. Then, nothing, no trace. What happened to her? Don't know. But 3 years later, another woman vanishes. Catherine Reeves. Same pattern, connected to Tremaine, then gone. I talked to some people who knew her. They said she seemed afraid near the end. Talked about wanting to leave but couldn't. Ronan's jaw clenched. Where is she now? Brightwood Asylum, north of the city. I checked the records. She was committed 5 years ago for mental instability. Tremaine's signature is all over the paperwork. Is she actually insane? No way to know without seeing her, but the timing's suspicious. And here's the thing. Tremaine visits her regularly, pays her bills personally. Why would he do that unless he's got a reason to keep her there? To keep her quiet. That'd be my guess. Blackwood leaned back. There's more. Tremaine's businesses are mostly legitimate, but he's got connections to some rough people. Loan sharks, enforcers, the kind of men who make problems disappear. And his finances don't quite add up. He's spending more than his businesses bring in, which means money's coming from somewhere else. Illegal sources? Probably. But proving it would take months and resources I don't have. What we do have is a pattern of missing women and at least one locked in an asylum under questionable circumstances. That's leverage. Ronan studied the papers. How do I use it? Carefully, very carefully. Because if Tremaine realizes you're onto him, he'll either disappear your wife the same way he did the others, or he'll have you killed. Maybe both. So what do I do? Blackwood was quiet for a moment. We need proof. Real, solid evidence that Catherine Reeves was committed fraudulently. If we can get that, we can threaten to expose him, make him choose between his reputation and your wife. How do we get proof? By talking to Catherine. I've got a contact at Brightwood, an orderly who owes me a favor. He can get us in to see her, but it's risky. Tremaine has people watching that place. When? Tomorrow night, after visiting hours. We go in the back way, talk to Catherine, and get out before anyone notices. Ronan nodded. I'll be ready. One more thing, Blackwood said. If this goes wrong, if we get caught, or Tremaine finds out, there's no guarantee I can protect you. You understand that? I understand. And you're willing to risk it anyway? Ronan thought about Eleonora, about the way she'd looked at him before getting into that carriage, about the vow he'd made. I'm willing to risk everything. Blackwood nodded slowly. Then we'd better make sure it's worth it. The asylum sat on a hill surrounded by bare trees, its gray stone walls catching the last light of day like a monument to despair. Ronan watched it from the cover of the woods, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Beside him, Blackwood checked his pocket watch for the third time in as many minutes. Nervous? Ronan asked. Smart, Blackwood corrected. There's a difference. My contact said 9 o'clock. We go in through the service entrance, talk to Catherine, and leave. 15 minutes, maximum. And if we're caught, then we both end up locked inside and your wife stays exactly where she is. Blackwood pocketed the watch. Still want to do this? Ronan didn't bother answering. He'd ridden 3 days to get here, spent money he couldn't afford to lose, and walked away from everything familiar. Backing out now wasn't an option. At 9 o'clock precisely, a door opened at the rear of the building. A man in an orderly's uniform stepped out, looked both ways, and lit a cigarette. That's him, Blackwood said. Come on. They crossed the open ground quickly, staying low. The orderly, a stocky man with a crooked nose, barely glanced at them. You're late, he muttered. 2 minutes, Blackwood said. Where is she? 3rd floor, east wing, room 304, but you've got 10 minutes, not 15. Night supervisor makes rounds at 1:15. He led them inside through a dim hallway that smelled of carbolic acid and something worse underneath. The building was quieter than Ronan had expected. No screaming, no chaos, just an oppressive silence broken occasionally by distant murmuring or the sound of footsteps overhead. They climbed 2 flights of stairs and emerged into another hallway, this one lined with heavy doors. Each had a small window at eye level covered with wire mesh. The orderly stopped at 304 and pulled out a ring of keys. She's not violent, but she doesn't talk much. Tremaine's visits did that to her. How often does he come? Blackwood asked. Every few months. Stays about an hour. Always brings flowers. Always leaves her in worse shape than he found her. The orderly unlocked the door. 10 minutes. I'll keep watch. The room was small and sparse. A bed, a chair, a washstand. No pictures, no personal items, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived there. And sitting on the bed, staring at nothing, was a woman who might have been 30 or 50. It was impossible to tell. Catherine Reeves looked like a ghost, thin to the point of frailty, with lank brown hair and hollow eyes. She wore a plain gray dress and no shoes. When they entered, she barely moved. Catherine, Blackwood said gently, my name is Henry Blackwood. This is Ronan Vex. We need to talk to you about Marcus Tremaine. At the name, Catherine flinched. Ronan moved slowly into the room, keeping his distance. We're not here to hurt you. We just need to know the truth about how you ended up here. Catherine's eyes focused on him for the first time. "The truth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The truth doesn't matter." "It matters to us," Ronan said. "Why?" Her gaze was unsettling, too direct, too knowing. "Are you another one he tricked? Another contract?" "Not me. A woman I care about. He took her the same way he took you." Catherine laughed, a brittle sound that made Ronan's skin crawl. "Then she's already lost, just like I was, just like all of us." "There were others?" Blackwood asked. "Before me, yes. I don't know how many. Margaret, certainly. She told me once, before she disappeared. Warned me. I didn't listen." Catherine stood slowly, moving to the window. "Marcus is very careful, very clever. He finds women with no family, no money, no one who'll miss them, makes them sign contracts they don't understand, and when they try to leave, he locks them away," Ronan finished. "If they're lucky. Margaret wasn't lucky." "What happened to her?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "I think he killed her. I can't prove it, but she threatened to expose him, and then she was gone. Just gone." Ronan's blood ran cold. "Did you tell anyone, the police?" "I tried. They didn't believe me. Marcus has friends everywhere. Money talks louder than truth." She turned from the window and her eyes were clearer now, more present. "He'll do the same to your woman. If she fights too hard, if she knows too much, he'll make her disappear. That's what he does." "Not if I can help it," Ronan said. "You can't. No one can. I tried. Look where it got me." Catherine gestured at the room. 5 years in this place, 5 years of being told I'm insane, that my memories are delusions, that Marcus is a generous man taking care of his poor, sick former companion. And the worst part? Sometimes I almost believe it. Blackwood stepped forward. "Catherine, if you testified, if you told a judge what you just told us, we could get you out of here, and we could stop Tremaine." "Testify? They'd never let me near a courtroom. I'm a certified lunatic. My word means nothing." "It would if we had evidence. Documentation. Something that proves you weren't insane when you were committed." Catherine laughed again. "You think Marcus left evidence? He's too smart for that. The doctors here will swear I've been unstable for years. The commitment papers are legal and proper. There's nothing to prove." "What about the contract?" Ronan asked. "The one you signed. Do you remember what it said?" "Employment. At least that's what he told me. I was working as a seamstress, barely making enough to eat. He offered me a position managing one of his properties, better pay, room, and board. All I had to do was sign some papers." She shook her head. "I didn't read them carefully enough. By the time I realized what I'd agreed to, it was too late." "But you still have a copy?" "No. Marcus kept all the paperwork, said it was safer that way." Ronan exchanged a look with Blackwood. Without documentation, Catherine's testimony was worth nothing. Tremaine had been thorough. "There has to be something," Ronan insisted. "Some proof. Some way to—" "There isn't," Catherine interrupted. "I've had 5 years to think about it. Marcus is untouchable. The only way to beat him is to kill him. And even then, he probably has contingencies in place." She sat back down on the bed, her brief moment of clarity fading. "Tell your woman to submit. It's easier that way. Fighting only makes it worse." "I can't tell her that." "Then you're condemning her to this, or worse." The orderly appeared in the doorway. "Time's up. Supervisor's on his way." Blackwood moved toward the door, but Ronan stayed where he was. "Catherine, if there was a way, any way, to get you out of here and bring Tremaine down, would you help us?" She looked at him with those hollow eyes. "There isn't a way. But if there was—" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. "Yes." Ronan nodded and followed Blackwood out. The orderly locked the door behind them, and they hurried back through the building the way they'd come. Outside, the night air felt clean after the asylum's oppressive atmosphere. They walked in silence until they reached the woods where they'd left their horses. "Well," Blackwood said finally, "that was enlightening and completely useless. We learned he's done this before, that there's a pattern. A pattern isn't evidence, and without evidence, we can't touch him." Blackwood swung into his saddle. "I'm sorry, Vex. I thought we'd find something we could use, but Tremaine's covered his tracks too well." Ronan mounted his own horse, his mind racing. "There has to be another way. Maybe. But I'm out of ideas and out of leads." Blackwood turned his horse toward Denver. "What are you going to do?" Ronan stared back at the asylum for a moment. Then he turned and followed Blackwood down the hill. He didn't have an answer yet, but he'd find one. Back in Denver, Eleonora was discovering her own paths to resistance. It started small. Deliberate slowness in getting dressed, claiming headaches to avoid social events, speaking just enough to be polite but not enough to be engaging. Small rebellions that couldn't be punished but accumulated like drops of water wearing down stone. Marcus noticed, of course, but he seemed to view it as a phase, something she'd grow out of once she accepted her situation. He was wrong. On her 12th day in captivity, Sarah the maid made a mistake. She left Eleonora's door unlocked while fetching breakfast, and for 5 precious minutes, Eleonora had access to the hallway. She used it. Moving quickly but quietly, she tried other doors. Most were locked. But one, a small room near the back stairs, opened. Inside she found what looked like a storage closet. Cleaning supplies, linens, and shoved in the back corner, a wooden crate. Eleonora heard footsteps and quickly closed the door, hurrying back to her room just as Sarah rounded the corner with the breakfast tray. "Sorry for the wait, ma'am," Sarah said, setting down the tray. "Cook was slow this morning." "It's fine," Eleonora said, her heart still racing. That night, during her supervised time in the library, she watched Mrs. Hodges carefully. The housekeeper kept a ring of keys at her waist, but she also kept a second set in the library desk drawer. Eleonora had seen her retrieve them once when the gardener needed access to the shed. The knowledge sat in Eleonora's mind like a seed waiting to sprout. 2 days later, Marcus announced he'd be traveling to Colorado Springs for business. He'd be gone for 3 days. "Mrs. Hodges will supervise in my absence," he told Eleonora over dinner. "I expect you to behave. Don't make me regret giving you more freedom while I'm gone." "What freedom?" Eleonora asked. "The freedom of not having to dine with me every evening. I think you'd appreciate the break." He left the next morning in a flurry of luggage and instructions. The house felt different with him gone. Still a prison, but one with a distracted warden. Eleonora waited until evening. During her library time, while Mrs. Hodges was called away to deal with a problem in the kitchen, she moved quickly to the desk and opened the drawer. The keys were there. She took them, tucked them into the pocket of her dress, and returned to her book just as Mrs. Hodges came back. "Everything all right?" the housekeeper asked. "Fine," Eleonora said, not looking up. "Just reading." That night, after the house grew quiet, Eleonora waited. She'd counted the hours enough times to know the schedule. Mrs. Hodges retired at 10, the other servants by 11. By midnight, the house was silent. She took the keys from where she'd hidden them under her mattress and moved to her door. It was locked from the outside as always, but the keys fit. The lock clicked open. Eleonora stepped into the hallway, her heart hammering so hard she was sure someone would hear it. No one came. She moved quickly through the dark house, testing doors. The storage room opened easily. Inside, by the light of a single candle she'd brought, she examined the wooden crate more carefully. It was full of papers. Legal documents, contracts, letters, all relating to Marcus's business dealings. She rifled through them quickly, looking for anything that might help her. Near the bottom, she found something that made her stop breathing. A folder labeled Catherine Reeves. Inside were commitment papers, doctor's reports, and a series of letters. Eleonora read quickly, her hands shaking. The letters were from Catherine to Marcus, written before her commitment. They were desperate, pleading. She begged to be released from their contract, threatened to go to the authorities, accused him of fraud. The dates told the story. Catherine's threats in March, her commitment in April. And there, paper clipped to the commitment order, was a handwritten note in Marcus's own writing. Problem solved. Dr. Morrison very accommodating. It was evidence, not ironclad, but something. Proof that Marcus had used Catherine's threats as justification to lock her away. Eleonora's hands shook as she folded the papers and tucked them into her dress. She was about to close the crate when she saw another folder. This one labeled Margaret Hayes. She opened it. The contents made her stomach turn. Margaret's contract, similar to Catherine's. Letters showing she'd also tried to break free. And then, dated from 5 years ago, a newspaper clipping about a body found in the South Platte River. Unidentified woman, presumed suicide. Attached to the clipping was a note. Too bad about Margaret. Some people just can't handle disappointment. Eleanora's legs nearly gave out. He'd killed her, or had her killed, and kept a record of it like a trophy. She grabbed that folder too, replaced the crate exactly as she'd found it, and hurried back upstairs. In her room, she locked the door and hid the papers under a loose floorboard she'd discovered days earlier. Then she sat on her bed and tried to calm her racing heart. She had evidence, real evidence that Marcus Tremaine was not just a controlling man, but a murderer. Evidence that could save her and Catherine both. Now she just had to figure out how to use it. Ronan spent 2 days after the asylum visit trying to formulate a plan. Every option he considered ended the same way, with him in prison or dead and Eleanora still trapped. He was sitting in his boarding house room staring at Blackwood's notes when someone knocked on his door. It was the landlady, Mrs. Murphy. "Mr. Vex, there's a young woman here to see you. Says it's urgent." Ronan's first thought was Eleanora, but that made no sense. He went downstairs to find a girl of about 16 standing in the parlor, twisting her hands nervously. "Mr. Vex?" she asked. "Yes?" "My name is Sarah. I work at Mr. Tremaine's house. I need to talk to you. About Mrs. Tremaine." Ronan's pulse jumped. "Is she all right?" "For now. But Mr. Tremaine went to Colorado Springs and she's been doing something. I don't know what, but she's been sneaking around at night. I think she's planning something." "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Because Mrs. Hodges told me what happened to the last woman, Catherine, and before her Margaret. Mr. Tremaine does terrible things, and nobody stops him. But I saw you, the day he took Mrs. Tremaine. I saw the way you looked at her, like you actually cared." "I do care." "Then you have to help her. Before he comes back and finds out what she's been doing, he'll hurt her, or worse." Ronan forced himself to think past the fear. "What exactly has she been doing?" "I don't know, but last night I saw her light. In the middle of the night. And this morning some of Mrs. Hodges' keys were in the wrong place. Mrs. Tremaine's been going somewhere, looking for something." Evidence, Ronan thought. She was looking for evidence. "When does Tremaine get back?" "Tomorrow afternoon. Less than 24 hours. If Eleanora had found something, if she'd taken something, Marcus would discover it when he returned." And then, Ronan couldn't let himself finish that thought. "Can you get a message to her?" he asked Sarah. "Maybe, if I'm careful." "What do you want me to say?" Ronan pulled out a piece of paper and wrote quickly. "I'm here. I'm coming. Be ready." He folded it and handed it to Sarah. "Give her this, and tell her to pack only what she absolutely needs, nothing that will be noticed missing." Sarah nodded and tucked the note into her apron. "There's something else. Mrs. Hodges keeps talking about Brightwood Asylum, like Mr. Tremaine's planning to send Mrs. Tremaine there if she doesn't behave. You need to get her out before that happens." "I will." Ronan walked her to the door. "Thank you for coming here, for risking this." "Just save her," Sarah said quietly. "Please." After she left, Ronan went straight to Blackwood's office. The detective looked up from his desk, surprised. "Vex, I wasn't expecting—" "I need a plan," Ronan interrupted. "Tonight, to get Eleanora out of that house." "Tonight? That's insane. We have hours, maybe less. Tremaine's coming back tomorrow, and when he does, he'll either lock her in that asylum or kill her. I'm not waiting anymore." Blackwood studied him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." "All right." Blackwood pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "Then we're going to need help. And probably a miracle. But let's see what we can do." The note reached Eleanora during her afternoon library time. Sarah slipped it into a book she was shelving, and Eleanora found it when she went to retrieve the volume. Her hands trembled as she read Ronan's words. "I'm here. I'm coming. Be ready." He'd found her, just like he'd promised. Eleanora's eyes burned with tears she couldn't afford to shed. Not here. Not with Mrs. Hodges watching from across the room. She tucked the note into her sleeve and kept reading, her mind racing. Ready for what? How was he planning to get her out? The house was locked tight, guarded by servants loyal to Marcus. Any escape attempt would be seen, reported, stopped, unless it happened when no one was watching. That night, Eleanora barely touched her dinner. Mrs. Hodges noticed but said nothing. After the meal, Eleanora returned to her room and packed a small bag with only essentials. A change of clothes, the papers she'd stolen, the little money she had left. Then she waited. Midnight came and went. The house settled into silence. Eleonora sat by her window, watching the street below, every nerve on edge. At 1 a.m, she saw movement. 2 figures in the shadows across the street, one large, one smaller. Ronan. Her heart leaped. But how would he get to her? The front door was locked. The windows were too high to climb. Then she heard it. A sound from downstairs. Breaking glass, muffled but distinct. Someone had forced entry. Footsteps in the hallway. Running. Mrs. Hodges' voice, sharp with alarm. "Who's there? Carson, wake up!" More footsteps. Shouts. The sound of furniture overturning. Eleonora grabbed her bag and moved to her door. It was still locked from the outside. She pounded on it. "Let me out!" No response. The chaos downstairs was getting worse. Men's voices now, fighting. Then her door burst open. Not unlocked, broken. The frame splintered as Ronan's shoulder hit it. He looked wild, hair disheveled, coat torn, a cut above his eye bleeding freely. But his eyes were clear and focused entirely on her. "We need to go," he said. "Now." Eleonora grabbed her bag and ran. They made it to the stairs before Carson appeared, blocking the way down. The butler had armed himself with a fireplace poker. "Stop right there," he commanded. Ronan didn't slow down. He hit Carson like a freight train, and the 2 men went down in a tangle of limbs. Eleonora jumped over them and kept running. Behind her, she heard Ronan grunt with effort, then Carson's shout of pain. Then Ronan was beside her again, breathing hard. "Front door," he said. They burst outside into the cold night air. Blackwood was waiting with 2 horses, already saddled. "Move!" the detective shouted. Eleonora had barely ridden before, but she pulled herself into the saddle through sheer determination. Ronan mounted beside her, and they kicked the horses into motion just as the house behind them erupted with voices and light. They rode hard through the dark streets of Denver, not slowing until the city was behind them and they were on the open road heading north. Only then did Ronan pull his horse to a stop, breathing hard. "You all right?" he asked. Eleonora nodded, not trusting her voice. Now that the adrenaline was fading, she was shaking. Ronan dismounted and helped her down. For a moment, they just stood there. And then Eleonora threw her arms around him. He held her tight, his heart hammering against her cheek. "I told you I'd find you," he said quietly. "I know." Her voice broke. "I know." Blackwood caught up to them, his horse lathered with sweat. "We need to keep moving. Tremaine will have every lawman in Denver looking for us by morning." "Where are we going?" Eleonora asked. "Brightwood," Ronan said. "We're getting Catherine out, then we're heading back to Montana with enough evidence to bury Tremaine for good." Eleonora pulled back to look at him. "I have evidence, papers I stole from his house, about Catherine, about Margaret Hayes." Ronan's eyes widened. Margaret Hayes? He killed her, or had her killed, and he kept records. She opened her bag and showed him the folders. Blackwood took them, his expression grim as he read by moonlight. "This is good, really good, but we still need Catherine's testimony to make it stick." "Then let's go get her," Eleonora said. They rode through the night, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. By the time they reached Brightwood Asylum, dawn was breaking over the hills. The orderly who'd helped them before was just finishing his night shift. His eyes went wide when he saw them. "Are you insane? Tremaine's people are looking for you. They were here an hour ago asking questions." "We need Catherine," Ronan said, "right now." "I can't just—" Blackwood pulled out a roll of bills. "Yes, you can. Get her. We'll wait in the woods." The orderly hesitated, then took the money. 5 minutes. If I'm not back, I've been caught. Run." He disappeared inside. Ronan, Eleonora, and Blackwood waited in the pre-dawn shadows, every second feeling like an hour. Finally, the orderly emerged with Catherine. She looked terrified and confused, still in her asylum dress, clutching a thin shawl. "What's happening?" she asked. "Where are we going?" "Away from here," Eleonora said. "Come on." They had to double up on horses. Catherine with Blackwood, Eleonora with Ronan. It would slow them down, but there was no choice. As they rode away from Brightwood, the sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Behind them, somewhere in Denver, Marcus Tremaine was waking up to discover his carefully constructed world had just collapsed. And ahead of them lay the long road back to Montana, and a reckoning that had been years in the making. They rode hard until the horses couldn't take any more, then walked them until dawn stretched into full morning. Catherine hadn't said a word since leaving Brightwood, just clutched her shawl and stared at the passing landscape like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Blackwood pulled his horse to a stop near a creek. "We need to rest. The horses are done, and we're no good to anyone if we collapse from exhaustion." Ronan helped Eleonora down first, then Catherine. The woman's legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and Eleonora caught her by the arm. "Easy," Eleonora said. "When's the last time you walked more than a few steps?" "I don't remember." Catherine's voice was thin, trembling. "Years, maybe. They don't let us outside much." Blackwood unsaddled the horses and led them to water while Ronan kept watch on the road behind them. Eleonora guided Catherine to a fallen log and sat beside her. "I'm Eleonora," she said gently. "Ronan told me about you, about what Marcus did." Catherine looked at her with those hollow eyes. "You're the new one, the one he brought to replace me." "I wasn't meant to replace you. I was just another woman he could control." "Was?" Catherine's laugh was bitter. "You think this is over? You think running away changes anything? He'll find us. He always finds them." "Not this time." Eleonora pulled out the folders she'd taken from Marcus's house. "I have proof of what he did to you, to Margaret Hayes, evidence that can put him in prison." Catherine stared at the papers like they might bite her. "Where did you get those?" "His house. He kept them hidden in a storage room. I think he liked having a record, proof of what he'd gotten away with." "That sounds like him. Marcus always needed to win. Keeping trophies of his victories would appeal to him." Catherine took the folders with shaking hands and opened the one marked with her name. As she read, her expression shifted from disbelief to recognition to rage. "This note. About Dr. Morrison. I remember him. He was the one who signed my commitment papers. He barely examined me, just asked a few questions and declared me unfit. Marcus paid him," Blackwood said, returning from the creek. "That's clear from the wording. Very accommodating means he got what he paid for." "Can we use this?" Ronan asked. "In court? Maybe. It's not a confession, but it's close. Combined with Catherine's testimony about the fraudulent contract, about being locked away against her will, about Margaret's death." Blackwood nodded slowly. "Yeah, we might actually have enough." Catherine closed the folder and handed it back to Eleonora. "You're braver than I was, or more foolish. I'm not sure which." "Probably both," Eleonora admitted. "What happens now?" "Now we get you somewhere safe," Ronan said. "Then we make sure Marcus Tremaine never hurts another woman again." They rested for an hour, eating the provisions Blackwood had brought and letting the horses recover. Catherine fell asleep almost immediately, curled on the ground like a child. Eleonora covered her with a spare blanket and then walked over to where Ronan stood watch. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming for me. I told you I would." "I know, but saying it and doing it are different things. You could have been killed. You still could be if Marcus catches up to us." Ronan turned to look at her. "Did you really think I'd leave you there? I thought you might try and fail, that he'd have too much power, too many connections, that wanting to save me wouldn't be enough." "It was enough." He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're enough." The words hit Eleonora harder than she expected. She'd spent so much of her life being told she wasn't pretty enough, wasn't useful enough, wasn't worth the trouble. And here was this man who'd risked everything for her saying the exact opposite. She kissed him. Not the brief ceremonial kiss from their false wedding, but something real. Something that tasted like gratitude and fear and hope all mixed together. When they broke apart, Ronan's eyes were dark. "We should talk about what happens after." "After what?" "After we deal with Tremaine. After all this is over. About us." "What about us?" "That marriage we tried to have. It didn't take, not legally, but if you wanted, when this is done, we could try again, for real this time." Eleonora felt something loosen in her chest. "You still want that? After everything? More than before. You're not just someone I wanted to build a life with. You're someone I'd burn the world down for, and that's not the same thing at all." Before Eleonora could respond, Blackwood called out, "We've got company." They both turned. In the distance, dust rose from the road they'd traveled. Riders, moving fast. "How many?" Ronan asked. Blackwood squinted. 3, maybe 4. Could be Tremaine's men. Could be Law. Either way, we don't want to find out. They roused Catherine and got the horses saddled in under 2 minutes. The animals were still tired, but fear was a good motivator. They rode north, leaving the road for rougher terrain where pursuit would be harder. The landscape changed as they climbed into the mountains. Pine forests gave way to rocky slopes and narrow passes. The air grew thinner, colder. Catherine struggled with the altitude, her breathing labored and painful. "We need to stop," Eleonora said. "She can't keep this pace." "If we stop, they catch us," Ronan said. "If we don't stop, she'll fall off the horse and break her neck." Ronan looked back at Catherine's pale, sweating face and cursed under his breath. "There's a mining camp about 5 miles ahead. Abandoned, probably, but it'll have shelter. We can hold up there until dark, then keep moving." They pushed on, and the mining camp appeared just as Ronan had described, a collection of dilapidated buildings clinging to the mountainside, long since abandoned when the silver ran out. They took shelter in what had once been the foreman's cabin, a structure that was mostly intact despite the broken windows and rotting floorboards. Catherine collapsed immediately. Eleonora checked her over. Her pulse was rapid, her skin clammy. "She needs rest, real rest. Not an hour, but days." "What's wrong?" "We don't have days," Blackwood said, peering out the window. "Those riders are still coming. They're not giving up." "Then we split up," Ronan said. "Blackwood, you take the women north to Fort Collins. There's a lawyer there, Michael Brennan. Tell him everything. Show him the evidence. Get official protection for Catherine and Eleonora." "And what will you be doing?" "Buying you time. Those riders want me, not you. I'll lead them east, make them think we're all heading for Kansas. By the time they realize they're chasing the wrong trail, you'll be safely in Fort Collins with the law on your side." "That's suicide," Eleonora said flatly. "You against 4 men. You won't last an hour." "I'll last long enough." "No." She stepped in front of him. "We stay together, all of us. We find another way." "There isn't another way." "Then we make one." Eleonora turned to Blackwood. "How badly does Marcus want me back?" "Pretty badly, I'd guess. You're the one who got away. That's not good for his ego." "Then we use that. We let him catch up to us. And we negotiate." Ronan's face darkened. "Absolutely not. I'm not handing you over to him." "I'm not saying hand me over. I'm saying use me as bait. Marcus wants control. He wants to win. So we give him the illusion of winning, and then we take everything from him." Blackwood was looking at her with something like respect. "You want to set a trap?" "Yes, but it has to be perfect, because if it's not, we all die." They spent the next hour planning. It was risky, more than risky, it was borderline insane, but it was the only option that didn't involve splitting up or running forever. As the sun started to set, they heard hoofbeats approaching the camp. 4 riders, just as Blackwood had estimated. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, and one of them called out, "We know you're in there, Vex. We're not here to hurt anyone. We just want to talk." Ronan recognized the voice. Travis Gould, a hired gun who worked for anyone with enough money. Not a killer by nature, but not particularly moral either. "Talk about what?" Ronan called back. "Mr. Tremaine's offer. He's willing to be reasonable. Just send out the women, and you and your detective friend can walk away. No charges, no pursuit. You have his word." "His word is worthless." "Maybe, but it's the best offer you're going to get, because if you don't come out peacefully, we're coming in, and that gets messy for everyone." Eleonora stepped up beside Ronan. "Let me talk to them." "Eleonora, trust me." She moved to the doorway before he could stop her. "Mr. Gould, I'll come out, but I want to speak with Marcus directly, not through hired help." There was silence. Then, "Mr. Tremaine's in Denver. Won't be here for at least a day." "Then I guess we wait. Because I'm not going anywhere until I can negotiate directly with him. Tell him that. Tell him I have something he wants. Something more valuable than me." Another pause. Then the sound of horses moving away. One of the riders was heading back to Denver with the message. 3 men remained, taking up positions around the camp. They weren't leaving, but they weren't attacking either. It was a standoff. Blackwood closed the door and turned to Eleonora. "You bought us time. But when Tremaine gets here, what then? Then we show him the evidence. We make him understand that if anything happens to us, Copies of those documents go to every newspaper and lawman in Colorado. We make him choose between letting us go and watching his entire life collapse. He'll never go for it, Catherine said from her corner. Marcus doesn't negotiate, he dominates. Then we'll have to change his mind. Eleonora looked at Ronan. You still have that rifle? Yes. Good. Because when Marcus shows up, he needs to believe we're willing to use it. The night passed slowly. They took turns on watch while the others tried to sleep. Catherine's breathing was easier after rest, though she still looked fragile. Eleonora sat by the window during her shift, watching the campfires of Gould's men, and wondered if she'd just made a terrible mistake. Morning came with frost on the ground and the sound of more horses. A lot more. Eleonora counted 8 riders approaching the camp. At the center, mounted on a beautiful black horse, was Marcus Tremaine. He looked exactly as she remembered, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, like he was out for a pleasant morning ride instead of hunting down escaped property. Eleonora, he called out. I'm disappointed. We had an understanding. She stepped outside, ignoring Ronan's protest behind her. The understanding was a lie. Everything about you is a lie. Strong words from a woman who stole from me. I took what belonged to me, and to Catherine, and to Margaret Hayes. At Margaret's name, something flickered across Marcus's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Eleonora held up the folders. I have your records, Marcus. Everything you kept, every crime you documented. I know about Margaret, about Catherine, about all of it. His composure cracked slightly. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I think I do. You're a man who destroys women and calls it love, who locks them away when they resist and kills them when they threaten you. You're a coward with money, and that's all you've ever been. Marcus's face went cold. Give me those documents, now. No. Then I'll take them, along with you and Catherine. And your mountain man and his detective friend will hang for kidnapping and assault. You could try that, Blackwood said, stepping out beside Eleonora. But we've already made copies, left them with trusted people who'll deliver them to the authorities if we don't return safely. So you can kill us if you want, but the truth will still come out. It was a bluff. They hadn't had time to make copies. But Marcus didn't know that. He sat very still on his horse, calculating. What do you want? Freedom, Eleonora said, for me and Catherine. You tear up whatever fraudulent contracts you have, you release any legal claims, and you never contact either of us again. In exchange, these documents stay private. And if I refuse? Then we go to trial, public trial. Every newspaper in the territory will cover it. Your business partners will read about Margaret Hayes. Your society friends will hear about Brightwood Asylum. Your entire life will be dissected in front of everyone who ever respected you. Marcus's jaw clenched. You can't prove anything. Those documents don't show... They show enough, Blackwood interrupted. Patterns, connections, questions that will demand answers. And once people start looking, they'll find the rest. You know they will. The silence stretched out. Behind Marcus, Gould and the other hired men waited, hands near their weapons but not drawing. This could still go bad. Very bad. Finally, Marcus spoke. I want the originals. All of them. You'll get them once we have legal documentation that Catherine and I are free. Notarized releases, signed by you, filed with the courts. That could take weeks. Then we'll wait. In the meantime, you keep evidence that could destroy me? Yes. Consider it insurance. Marcus stared at her, and Eleonora saw something new in his eyes. Not desire, not even anger, just cold calculation. He was measuring costs and benefits, deciding if her freedom was worth more than his reputation. Fort Collins, he said finally. 3 days from now. I'll have the papers drawn up and filed. You bring the documents. We make the exchange in front of a judge. Agreed. But if you try to double-cross me, if those documents end up public anyway, I'll spend everything I have hunting you down, both of you. And your cowboy, too. Understand? Perfectly. Marcus turned his horse. 3 days, Eleanor. Don't make me come looking for you. He rode away with his men, leaving only dust and the echo of hoofbeats. Ronan came up beside Eleonora. You just negotiated with the devil. I know, but devils have something to lose. That makes them predictable. You think he'll actually show up? Actually honor the agreement? I think he'll show up. Whether he honors it? Eleonora looked at the folders in her hands. That's why we make real copies this time. and why we have witnesses, and why we don't hand over anything until Catherine and I are legally free and Marcus is too exposed to retaliate. Catherine appeared in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket. You stood up to him. I never could. You were alone. I'm not. Will it work, this plan? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. The honest truth was she didn't know. Marcus had agreed too easily. That worried her. Men like him always had contingencies. It has to work, she said finally, because it's the only plan we've got. They spent the next 2 days riding to Fort Collins, pushing hard but keeping watch for any sign of pursuit. There was none. Marcus was either honoring the truce or planning something worse. Fort Collins was smaller than Denver, but still bustling. They found a hotel and paid for rooms, then tracked down the lawyer Ronan had mentioned, Michael Brennan, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who listened to their story without interrupting. When they finished, he sat back in his chair. You understand that even with this evidence, convicting Tremaine of murder would be nearly impossible. The Margaret Hayes case is circumstantial at best. We're not trying to convict him, Blackwood said. We're trying to free Catherine and Eleonora from fraudulent contracts. That I can do, especially with Catherine's testimony about being coerced. And if Tremaine is willing to sign releases, that makes it even easier. Brennan picked up the folders. But you need to understand, men like Tremaine don't give up power easily. Whatever he agreed to, he's got a plan to get around it. That's what we're counting on, Eleanor said. He'll try to cheat, which means we need to be ready. What did you have in mind? Witnesses. Lots of them. I want the exchange to happen in the most public place possible, with enough people watching that Marcus can't make us disappear without everyone knowing. Brennan nodded slowly. The courthouse steps. Noon. I'll make sure there are reporters present. Local law, too. If Tremaine tries anything, he'll have to do it in front of half the town. Perfect. They spent the final day preparing. Blackwood made copies of the documents, real ones this time, and stored them with the local bank in a sealed envelope with instructions to open them if anything happened to their party. Brennan drew up the legal paperwork and filed preliminary notices with the court. Ronan took Eleanor aside the night before the exchange. They stood on the hotel balcony, watching the sun set over the mountains. Last chance to run, he said. We could take the documents, ride for Montana, and never look back. And spend the rest of our lives waiting for Marcus to find us. No, this ends tomorrow, one way or another. I don't like it. Too many things could go wrong. Name one plan that doesn't have risks. He couldn't, of course. Risk was the price of freedom. After this, Ronan said, assuming we survive, what then? Then we go home, back to Iron Creek, and we try to build something that lasts. Together? Eleanor took his hand. Together. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They dressed carefully. Eleonora in her best remaining dress, Catherine in clothes Brennan's wife had donated. They looked respectable, credible, like women who deserved to be believed. At 11:30 they walked to the courthouse. A crowd had already gathered, curious onlookers drawn by the promise of drama. Brennan had done his job well. 2 reporters stood near the steps, notebooks ready. The local sheriff was present with 2 deputies. And at exactly noon, Marcus Tremaine arrived. He came in a hired carriage, dressed immaculately, carrying a leather document case. He looked calm, confident, like a man who'd already won. That worried Eleanor more than anything. Brennan stepped forward. Mr. Tremaine, do you have the releases? I do. Marcus opened the case and pulled out several papers. All properly notarized and ready for filing. Miss Reeves and Mrs. Hale will be released from all contractual obligations to me. No legal claims will remain. And the contracts themselves? Destroyed. You have my word. Your word and 5 cents will buy us coffee, Blackwood muttered. Marcus's eyes narrowed. I've fulfilled my part. Now it's your turn. The documents. Eleonora held up the folders. First, Catherine and I read these releases. Then we watch you file them with the court. Then, and only then, you get what you came for. That wasn't the agreement. The agreement was an exchange. We're exchanging, just carefully. For a moment, Marcus looked like he might refuse. Then he handed the papers to Brennan. Review them. You'll see everything is in order. Brennan read slowly, checking every clause. Finally, he nodded. They're legitimate. Once filed, these will legally dissolve any contracts between Mr. Tremaine and Miss Reeves or Mrs. Hale. Then file them, Eleonora said. Marcus's smile was thin. After you hand over the documents. That's not how this works. Actually, it is, Marcus gestured, and 4 men stepped out of the crowd. Not Gould and his crew, but different men. Professional men with cold eyes. You see, I came prepared for your little double cross. Those papers are real. I'll file them, but only after I have those documents and any copies you've made. We had a deal, Ronan said, his voice dangerous, and I'm honoring it, just with modifications. Now, hand them over or this gets ugly. The sheriff stepped forward. Mr. Tremaine, I don't know what's going on here, but threats in front of a courthouse aren't. These people have stolen property of mine, Sheriff. I'm simply recovering it. If they resist, that's their choice. It was falling apart. Marcus had outplayed them, brought enough muscle to take what he wanted regardless of witnesses or publicity. Then Catherine spoke. No. Everyone turned to look at her. She'd been silent throughout, standing slightly behind Eleonora. Now she stepped forward, her voice stronger than it had been since they'd freed her from Brightwood. No, she said again. I won't let you do this anymore, Marcus. I won't let you hurt anyone else. Catherine, be quiet. You locked me in an asylum for 5 years. You killed Margaret. You've destroyed how many women? And you think you can just walk away from that? You're insane. Everyone knows it. Nothing you say matters. Maybe. But what about the newspapers? Catherine turned to the reporters. Do you want to know the real story? About Marcus Tremaine and the women he destroys? About Brightwood Asylum and Dr. Morrison and all the money that changes hands to keep inconvenient women locked away? One of the reporters stepped forward, pencil ready. I'm listening. Marcus's face went pale. Catherine, if you say another word, you'll what? Lock me up again? I've been in hell for 5 years. You can't scare me anymore. She looked at Eleonora. Give him the documents. Let him file the papers. And then we tell everyone everything. Because the truth is worth more than revenge. Eleonora understood. They could keep the evidence, try to use it against Marcus legally, and spend years in court battles they might lose. Or they could expose him in the court of public opinion, where a man's reputation mattered more than legal technicalities. She handed the folders to Marcus. He grabbed them, clutching them like a lifeline. Thank you for being reasonable. Now, if you'll excuse me, Mr. Tremaine, one of the reporters called out. Is it true you had Miss Reeves committed to an asylum against her will? Marcus stopped. That's absurd. Catherine was unwell. I was trying to help her. By paying Dr. Morrison to declare her insane, that's what she's claiming. She's delusional. And Margaret Hayes? The woman found dead in the South Platte River 5 years ago? Did you know her? Marcus's composure cracked. I have no idea what you're talking about. Miss Reeves says you do, says you kept records, says you've been preying on women for years. The reporter was writing fast now. Care to comment? This is slander, all of it. But the damage was done. The other reporter was already asking questions. The crowd was murmuring. The sheriff looked troubled. Brennan leaned over to Eleonora. We should go, while we can. They backed away slowly as Marcus tried to defend himself against the mounting accusations. He still had the documents. He still had his hired men. But he was losing the thing that mattered most, control of the narrative. By the time they reached their horses, the crowd had surrounded Marcus, questions flying from every direction. He was shouting now, threatening lawsuits and ruin, making it worse with every word. Will it be enough? Catherine asked as they mounted up. I don't know, Eleonora admitted. But it's something, and sometimes something is all you get. They rode out of Fort Collins with the signed releases in Brennan's possession and the sound of Marcus Tremaine's world crumbling behind them. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to justice. But for the first time in years, Eleonora felt free. The ride back to Montana took 10 days, and every mile felt like shedding weight. They traveled slowly, letting Catherine build her strength, stopping in small towns where no one knew their names or cared about their business. Blackwood split off in Wyoming, heading back to Denver to tie up loose ends and collect the rest of his payment from the bank deposits Ronan had left with Brennan. You did good work, Ronan told him before they parted ways. I got lucky, you got lucky. We all got lucky. Blackwood shook his hand. But luck runs out. Watch your back, Vex. Men like Tremaine don't forget. Let him remember, As long as he stays in Colorado, I don't care what he thinks about. Blackwood nodded and rode south, leaving the three of them to continue north into familiar territory. The mountains grew taller, the air colder. And when they finally crossed into Montana, Eleonora felt something in her chest loosen for the first time in weeks. Almost home, Ronan said quietly. Home. The word felt foreign and right at the same time. Eleonora had spent most of her life without one, just places she occupied until something better or worse came along. But Iron Creek Ranch had felt different from the start, like it might actually be worth staying for. Catherine rode behind them, silent as always, but Eleonora caught her looking at the landscape with something that might have been wonder, or maybe just disbelief that she was actually free. They reached Iron Creek on a cold afternoon in late October. The ranch looked exactly as they'd left it, solid, weathered, enduring. Smoke rose from the chimney, which meant someone had kept the place running in Ronan's absence. That someone turned out to be Tom Farley, the old wagon driver who'd brought Eleonora here all those weeks ago. He emerged from the barn as they rode up, grinning wide. Well, I'll be. Figured you two were dead or in prison by now. Nearly both, Ronan said, dismounting. Thanks for looking after the place. Wasn't going to let it fall apart. You pay too well. Tom's eyes moved to Catherine. Who's this? A friend, Eleonora said firmly. She'll be staying with us for a while. Tom nodded, asking no further questions. That was the way of frontier people. What you chose to share was your business, and what you didn't share was none of theirs. He helped them settle the horses and gave Ronan a rundown of the ranch's condition. A fence needed mending. 2 calves had been born. The hay stores were good for winter, normal problems, manageable problems. After Tom left, they stood in the main house and looked around. Everything was clean, organized, exactly as Ronan had left it, but it felt empty, like a place waiting for life to return. Catherine touched the wall tentatively, as if checking whether it was real. You live here? Just the 2 of you? Just us, Ronan confirmed, though you're welcome to stay as long as you need. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, you're surviving. There's a difference. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, the first emotion Eleonora had seen from her beyond fear and resignation. I don't know how to do this. Be free. Choose things. I've been told what to do for so long, I don't remember how to decide for myself. Eleonora put a hand on her shoulder. Then don't decide yet. Just rest. Everything else can wait. They gave Catherine the spare room, the same one Eleonora had occupied when she first arrived. It felt right somehow, this passing of safe harbor from one broken woman to another. Catherine disappeared into it and didn't emerge until the next morning. That night, Eleonora and Ronan sat by the fire, finally alone for the first time since Denver. The silence between them was comfortable, but weighted with unfinished conversations. What happens now? Eleonora asked. We rebuild. Fix what needs fixing. Prepare for winter. Ronan poked at the fire with an iron rod. And we figure out what we are to each other. I thought we already did that, before Marcus came. That was before. This is after. Everything's different now. Eleonora turned to face him. How is it different? Because before you were choosing me over nothing, over an empty life in town. Now you're choosing me after seeing what the world's really like. After nearly dying. After everything that happened in Denver. That's a different kind of choice. You think I might change my mind? I think you should be sure, really sure. Because I'm not an easy man, Eleonora. I'm stubborn and hard, and I don't know how to talk about feelings. I'll probably make you angry more often than I make you happy. You're also loyal and brave, and you rode into Denver to save me when you could have stayed here and been safe. Those things count too. Ronan was quiet for a moment. I want to marry you. Legally this time. Properly. But I need to know it's what you want, not just what you're settling for. Eleonora stood and walked to where he sat. She took his face in her hands and made him look at her. I'm not settling, I'm choosing. There's a difference. And I choose you. They married 3 weeks later in the same church where they'd tried before, with the same Reverend Paulson officiating. The ceremony was small, just Tom Farley and Catherine as witnesses, and a handful of townspeople who were more curious than friendly. Eleonora wore the same dress as before, but it felt different this time. Real. When Ronan kissed her, it wasn't brief or ceremonial. It was a promise. Afterward, they held a small reception at the ranch. Nothing fancy, just food and drink and the kind of awkward socializing that happens when people don't quite know what to say to each other. But it was theirs, and that made it perfect. Catherine helped serve food, moving through the small gathering with practiced efficiency. She still didn't talk much, but she was eating better, sleeping through the night. Small victories that added up to something like healing. As the sun set and the guests departed, Eleonora found Catherine on the porch, staring out at the valley. "You did good today," Eleonora said. "I just carried plates." "You were here, present. That's more than good." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "Do you think it lasts? This feeling of being safe?" "I don't know. Maybe safety isn't something you feel once and keep. Maybe it's something you have to choose every day." "That sounds exhausting." "Probably, but less exhausting than the alternative." Catherine smiled, small and fragile, but real. "Thank you for not leaving me in that place. Thank you for speaking up in Fort Collins, for risking everything to tell the truth. It was the least I could do. After you risked everything to get me out." Catherine turned to face her. "What will you do if he comes? Marcus? If he decides the scandal wasn't enough and he wants revenge?" Eleanor had thought about that question every day since leaving Colorado. The honest answer was she didn't know, but she'd learned something in the past months, that fear was only useful if it made you stronger, and useless if it made you freeze. "If he comes, we'll deal with it, together. But I don't think he will." "Why not?" "Because men like Marcus care about appearances more than revenge. The scandal destroyed his reputation. That's worse than losing me or Catherine. He'll rebuild somewhere else, find new victims, convince himself it wasn't his fault, but he won't risk more exposure by coming after us." "You sound very sure of that." "I'm not sure of anything, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway, because the alternative is spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, and I'm done doing that." Catherine nodded slowly. "I want to learn that, how to stop looking over my shoulder." "Stick around long enough, maybe you will." Winter came hard that year, with snow that piled higher than the fence posts and temperatures that made the barn animals huddle together for warmth. They spent most of their time inside, reading by firelight, playing cards, telling stories. Catherine started helping with the cooking, then the mending, then the bookkeeping. She had a head for numbers that surprised all of them. "I used to manage accounts," she explained one evening, "before Marcus, for a shipping company. I was good at it." "You still are," Ronan said, looking at the ledger she'd organized. "This is better than anything I ever did." "It's nice to be useful again, to do something other than exist." By spring, Catherine had filled out, color returning to her face. She smiled more, talked more, started making plans that stretched beyond the next day or week. She mentioned maybe opening her own bookkeeping business, working for ranchers who needed help managing their finances. "You'd be good at that," Eleanor told her. "You think people would hire me, knowing where I came from? The ones worth working for won't care, and the ones who do care aren't worth your time." Catherine set up a small office in town that summer, and within 6 months she had more clients than she could handle. She rented a small house near the center of town, close enough to visit Iron Creek regularly, but far enough to build her own life. The day she moved out, she hugged Eleonora tight. "Thank you for showing me it was possible." "What was possible?" "Starting over, being more than what someone else made you." Eleonora watched her ride away and felt the particular satisfaction that comes from watching someone you helped find their footing. Life at Iron Creek settled into rhythms that felt earned rather than given. The ranch prospered. They added cattle, expanded the grazing land, built a second barn. The work was hard, relentless even, but it was theirs. And that made all the difference. Eleonora learned to ride properly, to rope cattle, to birth calves when the need arose. She learned the land, which pastures were good in spring, which needed rest, where the water ran clearest. The ranch stopped being Ronan's place and became theirs. They fought sometimes, about money, about decisions, about the small frustrations that come from two stubborn people building a life together. But they learned to fight fair, to say what they meant, to forgive faster than they held grudges. And slowly, the woman who'd arrived with nothing but a trunk of threadbare dresses became someone else entirely. Not better, exactly, just more fully herself. The town's opinion shifted gradually. People stopped whispering about the outcast rancher and his mysterious wife. They saw the ranch thriving, saw Eleanor at the general store paying fair prices and keeping her word, saw Ronan helping neighbors when their own ranches faced trouble. Respect came slowly, but it came. Marshal Dawson stopped by one afternoon in the second year, ostensibly to check on some cattle that had wandered onto federal land, but really, Eleanor suspected, to see how they were doing. Heard interesting news from Denver, he said over coffee. Marcus Tremaine's businesses have been failing. Bank got investigated. Mining supply company went under. He's selling off properties, moving east supposedly. Good, Ronan said simply. There's more. Catherine Reeves gave a full deposition to federal marshals about the fraudulent commitments, the bribes, everything. They're building a case. Might actually stick this time. Will Catherine have to testify? Eleanor asked. Probably, if it goes to trial. You might too. Eleanor exchanged a look with Ronan. If they need us, we'll be there. Dawson nodded approvingly. Thought you might say that. For what it's worth, you two did something most people wouldn't have the guts to do. You took on a powerful man and won. We survived, Eleanor corrected. That's not the same as winning. Close enough. The trial happened the following spring. Eleanor and Ronan traveled to Denver with Catherine, who'd grown strong enough to face Marcus again without flinching. The courtroom was packed with reporters and curious onlookers, all eager to see the respectable businessman brought low. Marcus looked smaller somehow, older. The confidence he'd worn like armor had cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. His lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. Catherine's testimony was devastating, calm, factual, unshakable. When Eleanor took the stand, she looked directly at Marcus and told the truth. About the fraudulent contract, about the captivity, about the threats. She didn't embellish or exaggerate. She didn't need to. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was guilty on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful imprisonment. Marcus Tremaine was sentenced to 15 years in prison. As the marshals led him away, he looked back at Eleonora. She expected hatred in his eyes. Instead, she saw nothing, just emptiness. Outside the courthouse, Catherine stood very still, processing what had just happened. It's over, Eleonora said. Is it? Catherine's voice was distant. I thought I'd feel different, triumphant or relieved or something, but I just feel tired. That's normal. Justice doesn't erase what happened. It just stops it from happening again. Do you think he'll serve the full sentence? Probably not. Men like him always find angles, but even if he gets out early, he's broken. His reputation's destroyed. His money's gone. He's nothing. Catherine turned to face her. We did that? Together. We survived that. Together. The rest is just consequences catching up to him. They returned to Montana the next day, leaving Marcus Tremaine to face his reckoning alone. Life moved forward the way it always does, in small moments that accumulate into years. Ronan taught Eleonora to shoot, and she turned out to be a better marksman than he was. Eleonora taught Ronan to read better, and they spent winter evenings going through books ordered from back east. They learned each other's silences, each other's fears, each other's small joys. 3 years after the trial, Eleonora stood in the ranch house kitchen, rolling out dough for bread, when Catherine rode up with news. Marcus Tremaine is dead, she said without preamble. Eleonora stopped rolling. How? Prison. Some kind of altercation with another inmate. Details are unclear, but the result isn't. Eleonora waited for some feeling to arrive. Relief, satisfaction, grief even. But there was only a kind of distant acknowledgement, a chapter closing. How do you feel? She asked Catherine. Free. Really, truly free. Not because he can't hurt me anymore, I already knew that, but because I don't have to care what happens to him. He's just done. Ronan came in from the barn, saw their faces, and stopped. What happened? Marcus Tremaine's dead, Eleonora said. He absorbed this information with the same stillness he brought to most things. Then, good, one less evil thing in the world. They didn't celebrate. They didn't mourn. They just noted it and moved on, the way you might note the passing of a storm that had once threatened everything but ultimately changed nothing essential. That night, lying in bed beside Ronan, Eleonora thought about the woman she'd been when she first arrived at Iron Creek Ranch. Invisible, desperate, half convinced she didn't deserve better. And she thought about the woman she was now, scarred, stronger, still afraid sometimes, but no longer paralyzed by it. You awake? Ronan asked in the darkness. Yeah. Thinking about him? Thinking about us, about how we got here. Regret any of it? Eleanor considered the question honestly. The fear, the captivity, the constant awareness that safety was temporary and hard-won. All of it had cost something, but it had also given something, the knowledge that she could survive worse than she'd imagined and come out still herself. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. It was hard and terrible, and I wouldn't choose to do it again. But it brought me here, to this, and this is worth it. Ronan pulled her closer. Yeah, it is. Years passed. The ranch grew. They hired help when the work became too much for two people alone. They built a bunkhouse, expanded the main house, added a porch that caught the evening sun. Catherine visited often, bringing her ledgers and her sharp humor, and occasionally a gentleman friend she was considering. The town stopped seeing them as outsiders and started seeing them as fixtures. When the school needed funds, Eleanor and Ronan contributed. When a neighbor's barn burned down, they were among the first to help rebuild. They became part of the fabric of the community, not celebrated, not ostracized, just present. Eleanor learned that being ordinary was its own kind of revolution for someone who'd spent so long being invisible, being seen without being sensationalized, being known without being defined by the worst thing that had happened to her. One evening, 7 years after first arriving at Iron Creek, Eleanor stood on the porch watching the sun set over the valley. The ranch spread out before her, buildings she'd helped maintain, fences she'd helped mend, land she'd helped work. Evidence of the life they'd built through choice and stubbornness and the simple refusal to give up. Ronan came out to join her, as he often did. They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of knowing each other's thoughts without needing to speak them. You happy? He asked eventually. Eleonora thought about it. Happiness was such a strange word, too simple for the complicated mix of contentment, frustration, hope, and weariness that made up actual life. But there was something underneath all that complexity, something solid and true. Yeah, she said. I think I am. Good. What about you? Better than I deserve. Better than I ever thought I'd get. He put his arm around her shoulders. Thank you. For what? For being crazy enough to ride out here all those years ago. For not running when you saw what I was. For staying. Thank you for being worth staying for. They stood there as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A hawk circled overhead. The wind moved through the trees with a sound like breathing. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was enough. And sometimes Eleanor had learned enough was everything. The years that followed brought their share of hardships. Droughts that tested their water stores, winters that killed livestock, market prices that fluctuated wildly. But they weathered each challenge the same way they'd weathered Marcus Tremaine. Together, with grim determination and the knowledge that survival was a choice you made every day. Catherine eventually married a widower from Bozeman, a quiet bookkeeper like herself, who appreciated her mind more than her past. She sold her business in town and moved to start fresh somewhere new. But she wrote letters regularly, full of small details about her new life and larger truths about the process of healing. I never thought I'd trust a man again, one letter read. But Thomas is patient. He waits for me to be ready instead of demanding it. That makes all the difference. Eleonora understood. Trust wasn't something you recovered overnight. It was built in small increments, tested constantly, sometimes broken and rebuilt. But it was possible. That was the thing Marcus Tremaine had tried to destroy in all of them and failed. The belief that goodness existed and was worth reaching for. As Iron Creek Ranch prospered, Ronan and Eleonora began helping other women in situations similar to what Eleonora had escaped. Not officially, not with fanfare, but quietly. A job here, a safe place to stay there, connections to people who asked no questions. They never advertised it, but word spread anyway among the networks of desperate people looking for second chances. Some stayed, some moved on. All left different than they'd arrived. Why do we do this? Ronan asked one evening after a particularly difficult case. A woman who'd run from violence only to find herself too traumatized to trust the help being offered. "Because someone did it for us," Eleanor said. "Tom Farley brought me here without asking why I was running. You gave me a place when I had nothing. Blackwood helped when he didn't have to. We do this because we remember what it felt like to need help and actually receive it. Think it makes a difference? I know it does. Maybe not always. Maybe not to everyone. But to the ones it reaches, it's everything." 15 years after that first desperate ride to Iron Creek Ranch, Eleanor stood in the same spot where she'd first met Ronan and looked at the life they'd built. The ranch was thriving, employing 6 people full-time and more during peak seasons. The main house had been expanded to include a proper library, a bigger kitchen, rooms for the occasional visitors who needed sanctuary. She was 41 now, with gray starting to thread through her hair and lines around her eyes from squinting into the sun. Her hands were calloused and scarred from work. She looked nothing like the invisible bakery worker who'd stumbled off Tom Farley's wagon all those years ago. She looked like herself. Ronan was aging too, moving a bit slower, his beard more gray than dark. But he was still strong, still steady, still the man who'd promised to find her and kept that promise against impossible odds. They'd built something that mattered. Not just a ranch, though the ranch mattered, but a life based on the radical idea that people deserve second chances, that the past didn't have to define the future, that choosing each other again and again was its own kind of heroism. It wasn't the life Eleanor had imagined as a desperate 18-year-old signing papers she didn't understand, but it was better. It was real. It was earned. And on quiet evenings when the work was done and the valley spread out before them in all its harsh beauty, Eleanor would think about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, about the difference between surviving and living, about the courage it took to keep choosing hope when despair was easier. She'd learned that freedom wasn't a destination you reached and stayed at. It was something you fought for constantly, in small ways and large. It was standing up when staying down was safer. It was speaking truth when silence was easier. It was building something good from the wreckage of something terrible. And she'd learned that love, real love, wasn't about perfection or ease. It was about showing up, about staying when leaving was simpler, about seeing someone fully, flaws and fears and failures, and choosing them anyway. The outcast and the forgotten girl had become something neither of them had expected, partners in every sense, building a legacy that would outlast them both. Not through fame or fortune, but through the lives they touched and the example they set. That being broken wasn't the same as being destroyed, that starting over was always possible, no matter how many times you'd failed before. That the most radical act of resistance against people who tried to control you was to live well, love deeply, and refuse to let their cruelty define your story. As the sun set on another day at Iron Creek Ranch, Eleonora took Ronan's hand and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new reasons to keep fighting. But tonight, standing in the life they'd built from nothing but courage and stubborn hope, she allowed herself to feel what she'd once thought impossible. Peace. Not the peace of having no problems, but the peace of knowing that whatever came, they'd face it together. And that was enough. It had always been enough.